We have one man who is at the top of one of the companies of the internet, Nikesh Arora. What should we know about Nikesh?
Well, there are 3 people at Google that have the title of president, and one of them's name is Sergey Brin, another's name is Larry Page, and the third is Nikesh. And then if you want to kind of parse that a little bit, one's technology, one's product, and the third is business. So Nikesh has the job of feeding the real machine.
The revenues. So that's 25 billion.
That would be, I guess, is that fair?
Anyhow, he will tell you. Now, a warm applause, a great applause to Nikesh Arora and Spencer Rees for our last big session.
There you go.
Thank you, Marcel.
Anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
You've done a great job.
When Eric Schmidt got hired way back, one of the things people said about him was that he was hired to be the grown-up at Google. And I was curious, just coming in, do you consider yourself one of the grown-ups or one of the kids?
Oh, there's a kid in every one of us, isn't there?
Okay.
And at Google, we encourage you to bring your kid along.
They do?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how you're going to get the innovation to come. Right?
Another interesting thing about you is that I just found you were 36 years old when you joined Google. Many people at Google famously have worked most of their working lives there, and therefore their perspective is limited. I'm just curious, everybody has a picture of what Google's like as a company. They've read enough Fortune magazine stories or Wired stories to have a general opinion. I'm curious if there are things about Google that surprised you coming in as an outsider with some years of experience in other things.
Yes.
Okay.
Lots of them. I joined Google from a large, innovative German telecom company.
Deutsche Telekom?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's fair to say that I had to rewire my DNA when I got to Google. It was interesting. I ran marketing, I ran products in my prior life, and it's very hard in a traditional company to talk about products or marketing without having sort of a business plan, right? So you have to have your 4 Ps figured out. At Google, I realized you actually can do this from sort of an equational perspective. You set 3 Ps to 0. So for those of you who are marketing students, you basically set price to 0, you set promotion to 0, you set placement to 0, right? And the only thing you worry about is product.
So it sells itself.
You focus everything on 1 P, that's the product. Right. So actually, I was speaking at a conference in Dubai, and Philip Kotler was there. Right. So I sort of walked up to him and said, I have a question for you. I was a student of you in marketing, and he's written the world's almanac on marketing. And I said, what happens if you set 3 Ps to 0? And he said, wait, I have to go speak. I'll come back and talk to you. So, but I think it's a very interesting experiment. And if you set your price to 0, people's expectations go down tremendously. So I like to give the example. If I give you a free watch and it stops working after a week, you're going to say, that's pretty cool. I got a watch for free and it worked for a week. If I take $1 from you for that watch and it breaks after a week, you say, that son of a gun, you took $1 from me and the damn thing broke after a week. It's very interesting. The moment you charge people something, their perception, their value perception changes. And if you look at the internet successes, there are a lot of products have been free, which have caught the fascination of the users. And once that happens, you get the critical mass. Well, then you worry about the other 3 Ps.
In fact, free, a lot of you may know that the editor of my magazine, Chris Anderson, has just written a book called Free. And if you want to read the book about free, you should get that. But in the meantime, when people talk about free on the internet, what they really often mean is ad-supported. Yes. It's not free. It's got an ad-supported piece in it. And one of the problems, you guys have become something of a punching bag because everybody, like the newspapers came in saying, oh, wow, digital, we'll all go online. It'll be great. We'll put our stuff there. We won't have to pay for trucks. We won't have to pay for paper. And we'll make it up with digital targeted advertising, which will be a lot more valuable. Now, the problem has come up in the last 3 or 4 years. The CPMs aren't there. And I'm curious, from the point of view of you guys, is there hope for the publishers of the world that the CPMs, that targeting and data and analytics and all the kinds of stuff that you guys do are going to get the CPMs up to the point where it can start to support publications again in the manner to which they are accustomed?
You know, I think if you go back at the history of content, and I think there are more learned people in this room who know more about content than I do, but if you go back in the history of content, content has always been monetized either by advertising or by subscription or by pay-per-use, right? You can take any industry, whether it's the newspaper industry, the journal industry, the television industry, the radio industry, there has been that curve that you can basically monetize it anywhere on that curve. Right. And if you look, there have been free newspapers, which are purely ad-supported. There have been newspapers which are, like, there are journals which are no ads, purely subscription at $1,000 a year, and there is stuff in the middle. And I think what is going to happen on the internet is that same curve is going to get recreated on the internet. However, what you cannot do mathematically is take your existing curve and superimpose it on the internet curve, right? So suddenly, if you had 1,000 users, which helped you monetize in the current media form, you probably need 1 million users in the other form, right? So the way I think about it is, the user base has changed. There's 1.4 billion people connected on the web. So tomorrow morning, conceptually, you and I could launch something that 1.4 billion people could read or use. Now, if I can get 10 cents from 1.4 billion people a day, that's a lot more money than taking $100 from 10 people.
So you're saying part of the answer is reach?
I think part of the answer is finding out on that curve of free commodity content to premium content to super premium content, where your content falls on the curve. Rethink it from that perspective. You know, are 3,000 articles on Haiti a commodity, or are they premium content? And should you be investing as much money in recreating that content, or is there a way to syndicate that content if it's built once?
Now, one of the more amazing things about Google is that even though you guys are known as an ad machine, it's almost entirely based around keyword search and display. I mean, right now, this is a big push. Display, which most people think, when you say advertising to most people outside, they would think of what we in the industry think of as display. You guys are just starting in display now. Walk us through how you see display and how you see it being different from keyword search and how you approach the problem.
I think it's fair to say that at some point in time in my life or your life or both, a lot of the usage is going to shift to some form of online distribution. Okay. A lot of consumers are going to consume their stuff online. I mean, we're probably the transition generation. All of us sort of know old media, new media. My daughter, who's 12, will have no concept of a lot of things that happen in old media. So all the consumption is shifting online. If you believe that's true, most of the marketing and advertising will shift in that direction. Okay. Right, to some degree. And when that begins to happen, it's a new medium which allows you both interactivity, and it allows you the ability to unicast. So I can provide a different message to you or a different message to a smaller group of people. So I don't have to have one Super Bowl ad. I can have Super Bowl ads for groups of people. Right? So if you believe that context, our notion on display is at the very premium end. I believe I'm very, very positive about the whole notion of video on the web. I think you can see a lot of premium content developers in the video space slowly shifting their inventory online and doing it in a very sensible way, which I think will allow for it to be monetized.
Where do you think that's going to come from? A TV budget or a print budget, or?
You know, what's very interesting is a lot of the advertisers have become savvy, and they're starting to spend their money in online and offline in a reasonably intelligent way. The interesting thing is with online, you get a lot more measurement capability. You can actually see if this gentleman is watching an ad or the lady's watching an ad when they stop looking at an ad on TV, on the video. So on YouTube, when you're watching an ad, I can tell whether you looked at it for 8 seconds or 15 seconds or you saw the whole thing. So you get a lot more measurability, which is what marketeers like.
Are you answering my earlier question now about where the $40 CPMs are going to come from? Or are they going to come from video?
I think you'll get $40 CPMs to some degree from high-end premium display. At the same time, I think what's also a big shift which is going to happen in the next year or the next few years is we will stop buying sites and start buying consumer groups. So you'll be able to go target on the web an 18 to 24-year-old group in the UK or in the US or in a certain locality and say, I want that consumer segment.
Now, one of Google's famous advantages, competitive advantages, is a very large collection of data showing, following the activities of search, particularly search activities of your users, of the search users. Are you going to be leveraging that, for instance, in a video? In other words, when someone comes to a YouTube site, are you leveraging all their old? Do you know a lot about that guy, right?
Well, if the people have registered with us on YouTube and allowed us access to the data, yes, we have the ability to target them. But no, we're not. We can't go.
How many registered users now in all of the Google universe?
Millions.
Millions, but it's like hundreds of millions, I would think. Millions.
Yes.
And that includes, I mean, if any
hundreds of millions and also millions.
Okay. Once you're registered for any one piece, you're registered for all. Is that right? Okay.
If you're a Gmail user,
well, I've always had this theory, in fact, that you guys bought YouTube in the first place to make sure that you had logins from every teenager in the world.
YouTube has enough registered users on its own.
Well, let's talk about YouTube. Eric Schmidt, your valiant CEO and chairman, said recently that he assumes that it makes money. Was he assuming?
If he assumes, he must be right. He's the boss.
I mean, it's, YouTube, again, there's an interesting perception and reality. Everyone, or many people, think of YouTube as, user-generated content, crazy stuff. But interestingly, you guys are creeping into, I just noticed first-run movies have just popped up on pay-per-view. You've got lots of television deals going on. We just did a
streaming deal for cricket. I know most people here don't understand cricket.
Is that ad-supported?
We'll see.
We'll see. I mean, you're starting to look like a universal media machine. I'm just making that up.
I think what's very interesting is if you look at video on the web broadly, not just YouTube, there's a whole new category of content that has emerged. How many people in this room have actually watched long-form video on the web consistently? Okay, so there's like a less than. Where's the scientific experimental person? But it's
does long-form mean does long-term mean as a TV show? Long-term?
Like a 15-minute or 30-minute or 45-minute or an hour. And if you think about it, and if I ask the same question, how many of you have watched a clip on the web in the last week? Now look around. This is about the rest of the people, right? 80+%. So actually is a new format which has come up on the web, which is the short-form clip.
Actually, here's the third question. How many people only watch short clips?
I only watch short clips on the web. I don't have patience to sit down and watch 45-minute clips on the web just yet. So if you think about it, there's actually a whole new category of content called short-form clips, which are actually not cannibalizing television. Okay. Because you can still watch the whole show on TV, but you can watch a short clip, and that's usually what my friends will send me, say, look at this really cool thing that somebody sent. And the ability to monetize that or advertise on that, I think, is incrementally, sort of net incremental to the industry.
Well, but it's what struck me about that, the movie thing that was interesting is that, the television industry very broadly has two revenue streams. Actually three. One is ads, obviously. A second is pay-per-view, and a third is subscription. And especially, obviously it varies from country to country, but pay TV is certainly the healthiest part of the television ecosystem right now. Could you see, so right now you've got the ad piece on YouTube, you've got the pay-per thing, at least in an experimental phase. Could you see going to a subscription model?
I think, I guess the question, I'm going to turn the question back at you and say, in a few years it won't really matter if you get your video feed through an IP connection or through a broadcast connection, right? I mean,
as a consumer,
as a consumer. So most TVs are coming with a broadband cable in the back. I can stick a broadband cable behind my TV, have it do HD, have it do 3D. So if you believe that, then is there a distinction whether your movie that you're renting is delivered to you by some website with IP, or is it delivered through your broadcast cable network?
Well, that gets back to our earlier, I mean, from a consumer point of view, it doesn't make any difference.
Exactly.
From a TV industry point of view, it's a magnitude 9 earthquake. Are you guys working with those guys on this? Are you kind of saying, well, that we're going to do what we're going to do? How does that play out?
No, clearly, you cannot do this without the content owners, right? The content owners have to be willing to let you have their content.
Content owners, we know that you're working with because you've got rights.
Right.
How about the content distributors?
Yes, in the UK we have deals with Channel 4 and Channel 5 where they are the distributor and the aggregator of the content, and we're purely a mechanism through YouTube through which to distribute. So, we will work with either broadcasters or with original content owners depending on who has rights to the content.
How about
I think the issue here comes is who's got the digital rights. Right. So if the broadcaster has the digital rights, you work with the broadcaster. In some instances, the broadcasters don't have the digital rights.
How about you look at a company like, say, Comcast now, that's part content owner, part content distributor, and part plain old pipe. you have obviously three different levels that you could conceivably engage them on. How does that work? Do you talk to people like them?
Yeah, of course. We will engage with them on all three levels, right? We want to make sure that people can access services on their pipe. We want to make sure that if they have access to content, that content is available through multiple distribution platforms. I think the important part to understand is that the whole notion of content is that if you can create it once and distribute it many times, the probability of monetizing it is going to be much higher than if you keep it exclusively for your own particular platform. And of course, there's sort of a trade-off from an economic perspective.
Okay, now we're going to have to keep moving because, one of the things about Google, as everybody knows, very broad company, all kinds of businesses. Mobile. Yes. Have you got a Nexus 1 in your pocket?
I have two.
You have two? Why do you have two? Just for fun?
Because my BlackBerry busted on the way here, so I figured I'd just finally give it up, and I always carry two phones, that phobia, what if I don't have a phone?
Now, you've been pretty direct, you being Google, pretty direct that this is a very disruptive, your move into mobile, both at an operating system level and a hardware level, is highly disruptive to the US system where both those things have typically been very tightly wed to each other, and furthermore, the sales model has been tightly wed to contracts, and you guys have come in and basically thrown a bomb into this thing. What was the thinking there?
I think it's important to understand where we came from on the Android platform. I think the place where we came from is Larry and Sergey wanted to build an operating system which is open source for mobile phones. So if you look at the mobile phone bill of materials, 21% is software, which is higher than any other device that is created. And every time you build the next phone, you literally any manufacturer has to rebuild the hardware and rebuild the whole the part of the OS which works with that piece of hardware. So A, it's very costly. B, it basically eliminates the ability to interoperate. Mm-hmm. So our view, and Andy Rubin, who's basically the founder and father of Android for us, basically came out and said, I want to build the best experience using that OS. So the Nexus 1 is that experience, we believe, is a premium Android device experience. So what it does for us is, A, it allows us to disrupt the selling model. We want to be able to provide that online to millions of people who like Google. B, we want to raise the bar on many people who are trying to build Android devices and say, look, this is what we believe a best-of-breed experience looks like.
Is it reasonable shorthand to say that you guys are hoping to recreate in mobile the kind of open environment that exists right now on the web, on the conventional web?
Totally. Look, if you can have a reasonably common platform, it becomes a lot easier for application developers, i.e. you get much more content that you can have really quickly. It becomes much easier for hardware guys because they can go and innovate on the hardware side, and we will constantly innovate on the OS side. So for us, it drives more usage.
Do you think search is going to be as big a deal in mobile as it is on desktop?
I think the distinction between mobile and desktop will go away.
Right.
Because, 5 years ago, I had a 128 kilobits per second connection to my house using a narrowband broadband cable, right? Today, my phone has higher bandwidth than that. So all the applications I use on my desktop, I can use on my phone.
Does the reverse also hold? Are the mobile apps going to migrate onto the desktop?
So tomorrow, if you're walking around your house with a netbook, using a Wi-Fi network, is that a mobile device or a
Good question.
desktop?
Good question. I think that's TBD, isn't it? The netbook question.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. The distinction.
Well, there's a fun question right there. Is the desktop model going to hold up in long term, or is it going to recede and become something that people use in offices but rarely in their personal lives?
No, but it's very interesting. I don't know what people's usage behavior is. I have more computers in my house than people, and I have more phones on me than other people as well. But the whole idea is that I have a desktop which has a very big pipe coming into my desktop. Right. I use it for video conferencing. I use it for a whole bunch of stuff. I have huge storage on my desktop, so all my terabytes of pictures and movies and music is on there. And that acts sort of like a server, which then my mobile devices go tap into.
Well, okay, but do you worry, for instance, like a lot of people know, once upon a time, if I wanted to find a restaurant in Munich, I would have gone to a Google search engine and typed in restaurants in Munich.
Yes.
Now I have some app that will tell me that a restaurant universal, so therefore I skip your product and go straight to somebody else.
Google Maps. No?
I could use Google Maps, but there's a lot of other things I could use, and what I'm getting at is, you guys have, there's interesting, the search landscape 5 years ago, you guys could make a reasonable claim to search most of the internet that was of any interest. There was scientific publications that were behind gates. in the last 5 years, you've seen the rise of a big social network like Facebook, which is fundamentally not searchable at the moment. You've seen apps like I just described, where there's interesting and valuable information that does not reside on a static web page. Are you worried that the value of a search engine will decline as its ability to see it? You're kind of getting a little blinkered. Is that a problem that you guys worry about?
No. Look, I think if you remember the early days of search, right? For all of us who use search, when I used to search for something 7 or 8 years ago, I'd just be happy if I found a website. And if I search for something, I'd say, oh, wow, they have a website. And then if I click on the website, usually some smart corporate marketing person had scanned the brochure of the company and stuck it in the web. That was 7 or 8 years ago. So you'd be happy you find it on, I can remember going to page 2, 3, 4, looking for it. Today, people hate going past page 1. If you don't find it on page 1, you're really unhappy. And when you find it on page 1, you want it to be as precise as possible.
Do you guys track that? Do you track how often somebody has to go to the second?
We track everything.
Right.
So
that was a dumb question. Sorry.
You want to make sure that you're designing a consumer experience that is wonderful for people.
Okay.
So you've got to see consumer behavior. Right?
So you like
product innovation.
So you like it when they just stay on the first page, obviously.
Well, it's very funny. I sat in a meeting once, and Larry said something, and I turned around and said, "Wow, this is the only internet business where we want the user to find the useful information and get off our page as quickly as possible."
Instead of,
every other internet business wants you to come spend more time there. We're the guys who want you to get off that page as quickly as possible. So yes.
One of the ironies of market systems is that the bigger you get, the more sort of attention you get, and often the more critics you get. Critics. Sorry, this is a kind of general rule, unfortunately.
Okay, this is part of your 1976 experience.
What scares Google? You got lots of people out there sniping at you. What actually scares you?
I don't think scare is an appropriate word, but another way.
Worries. Okay, what worries you?
I think, if 10 years ago, if you had asked people who are they worried about, Google would not have come up in conversation.
Right.
It would have been very hard. And I think more than likely, innovation is going to come from some guys in a garage.
So you're worried about the two guys?
The 2 guys in the garage who are going to come back with something way more innovative, and we'll be sitting around working with people trying to move the old chess blocks around the.
What about, say, the French Parliament passing a tax on internet ad transactions?
I think it's important to understand Google is part of the internet ecosystem. Google is not the internet.
Okay.
So I think a lot of the conversations happen with Google in the mainstream because it's easy to talk about it in that context. But that's going to be bad for everybody in the internet business, not just bad for everybody in the internet business. It's going to be see change in the way advertisers work as well.
Okay, how about German newspaper publishers getting together? Ganging up and saying, hey, we're going to have, I guess we're really talking here about politics. An odd thing when you get big
That's
enough.
One thing we're really bad at.
When you get big enough, politicians start getting interested in you. And I think it's fair to say that you guys are at the stage where politicians, and there's a number of issues. Privacy is an issue, copyright is an issue, taxation is an issue. None of those, you just have to handle, is there a way of...
I think the way to think about it is that, we are in a world where it's fundamentally different, right? We're living in a digital world where 1.4 billion people are connected to the web and 3 billion people are connected by mobile phones. Everywhere you go, you leave a digital footprint. Right. This is like how when you used to use credit cards today, whoever wrote about Woozle is now written in history, right? The Woozle guys are now going to be sort of immortalized. So you're basically going to leave footprints. And what has happened is all of our policies, our copyright laws, our national borders were all designed for a world which did not anticipate a connected world in a digital way. So some of those things will have to change. So that is going to be applicable to the entire internet. Now, it's not publishers talking about Google, it's not the French Parliament talking about Google, it is all of us trying to contend with this digital economy and trying to figure out what do we need to do to adapt to this new digital world. I'll tell you what, whatever happens that hurts the ability for users to get what they want, that sort of stymies the growth of this digital economy is going to be a bad thing.
So chances are there are going to be more and more people working with Dave Drummond in the policy side of Google.
I think in Dave Drummond's policy side and many Dave Drummonds who work for various internet industries will have the same opportunity or same challenge.
So we need a conversation on this. Speaking of which, let's open this one.
I think he was here, right?
Sorry?
He was here yesterday.
Yeah, Dave was here. And by the way, we're going to try to avoid China because that's a policy issue and Nikesh doesn't need to be getting into that one. So no China questions, but go ahead, Esther. Can we get a mic for Esther Dyson here? I'll just give you. You want me to ask it? Here.
Among the things that you track, the question I'm interested in is if you take individuals and you look at cohorts of new users, experienced users over time as they go through their lives, what is the ratio of searching versus doing what Spencer said? You know, I don't need to search, I go to Yelp. I don't need to search, I go to Facebook to find out what my friends recommend. There's got to be a ratio, and I'd love to know how it changes. I'm sure you're looking at it.
I don't have the precise answer right now. I think it's fair to assume, as Spencer said, that over time people will go search at specific places because they believe that something more specific can satisfy that need at that point in time, whether it's Yelp or whether it's Facebook or whatever it is. Having said that, you know, the total volume of search continues to increase because there's just a way bigger corpus of data out there. And you're not sure, especially as data constantly evolves, who actually has the most recent version of it. Whether it's news, whether it's real-time feeds, all that stuff is new. We didn't have real-time feeds until, you know, Twitter came about. People started getting serious, which is just, you know, if you think about it, the best way to think about it, you know, 6-7 years ago, if you updated your crawl every day, it was a good thing because you had the most recent information. Then it became, if you updated every hour, you're actually doing fine. When you started doing news, every 15 minutes was needed. And now with Twitter, you have to literally update every second. So the consumer's needs are constantly changing. So we believe there's going to be a lot of people searching for a lot of things for a long time.
There's a question in the back there, please. Can we get a mic? In the meantime, I'm going to ask, I'll just say as a follow-up, isn't that probably the reason why you guys have acquired AdMob, which gives you a mobile revenue stream aside from search?
I think the reason we acquired AdMob is because we believe the mobile market is beginning to explode from a usage perspective. And, you know, based on our experience, advertising typically follows usage. And the people at AdMob had done a fantastic job in just figuring out how the ad ecosystem works on the mobile devices, et cetera.
Right.
So it's going to be a welcome addition.
So even though the mobile may follow, it's a different world, isn't it? I mean, it has some fundamentally different characteristics.
I mean, there's a buy versus build argument that is made all the time, right? So it's a matter of speed and how quickly can you get on sort of the bandwagon. And given the way the iPhone, the BlackBerry, the Nexus Ones, the Androids, et cetera, and the smartphones are evolving, it was important for us to continue to be in that space of advertising as it relates to the mobile devices.
In the back.
Allow me 2 questions.
Identify yourself, please.
Philip Piper from Proximic, contextual advertising and targeting. I'm a big fan of demand media. I really value what they've done to the ecosystem and the way that they built the business, and I'm sure that you do particularly as well, because
I'm a huge fan as well.
They just drive you value back to Google. The danger that I see, though, is that actually that 1P that you were referring to, the product, might be jeopardized by a content stream of increasingly sort of snack fast food content, which doesn't have the depth of the traditional content that you see across the web. So I would like to hear your comments if you see that the same way, the sweet poison that you're now taking, if that's going to over the long term actually jeopardize what you're trying to do on the product front, and maybe people turn more into social discovery to find out what the friends recommend rather than a search engine. Second question, I was really surprised to hear that on the things that keep you up at night, you didn't actually mention anything concerning, DC regulation on cookie tracking and, the amount of data that you can actually store. In a world of, display and performance targeting and the blend between the two, data is everything. So what does Google have as a perspective on that? I'd love to hear what your thinking is in 2010, what's going to happen.
Okay, what happened to the easy questions? Let me answer your first question on the demand media side. Outside of demand media, I think there's a whole consumer behavior shift going on, right? I end up getting a lot of my news based on Twitter feeds. I get Twitter feeds, and based on the people I follow and the newspapers I follow, I get enough sense of what's important out there, and then I will go out and go read that particular article or get more context. So I will scan, 200-300 tweets every few hours to see what's happening out there, and based on what's going on, I will go then read that article in depth. So I think the snacking still leaves room for depth, but people will choose based on their discovery what they want to snack on, what they want to read in depth. Now, that's my behavior. I'm sure different people are going to have different behaviors in the room. As it relates to your, so see, he's taken that scare thing and now made it what keeps me up at night. Right? Look, there is going to be constant evolution of this digital economy. There will be challenges, whether they're privacy, there's copyright, there's taxation issues, there's cookie tracking issues, and all of these will have to get solved by a bunch of people who understand the industry and get them to be evolved in the right direction of the user. So I have hope that all these issues will get solved in the right direction as these things gather critical mass. I have to be an optimist.
Matthias Weber from Weave magazine. I'm actually a bit surprised by the sort of, I would say, laissez-faire attitude that I hear out of from what you're saying. I would expect much more responsibility in exactly those topics that you just addressed, like copyrights, cookie tracking, from such a global, the biggest player in this area, which Google is. And that's just what I would, expect from your company much more than you do.
I appreciate that. I don't want me not staying up at night to be confused that we don't take these seriously.
It's just about responsibility, and it's a responsibility that Google has. Yeah. And I think it should play it more, open and actively.
Let's be fair, on all of these issues, we have very particular stances as it relates to copyright, as it relates to privacy, as it relates to the notion of cookie tracking, as it relates to China, as it relates to all these issues. And we take a very, very responsible stance to it. I mean, David was there yesterday, and he can talk ad nauseum about each of these issues. And we take them very seriously. But my point is that there's nothing you can do in those issues by getting overexcited about those and get too worried, because they have to take their evolutionary course, and you have to work with various industry players and people outside the industry to make this happen. So it's not going to happen overnight that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and this is going to go away. This is going to be with us for a while. So you have to take a measured, balanced, responsible approach.
I guess maybe what does that mean? Is there an opportunity here for Google to be more proactive? In other words, to just go out ahead rather than waiting for the politicians to come and bite you?
I think we have been proactive in many of these areas, and we have helped shape some of the conversations around privacy, around copyright, around cookie tracking, around interest-based advertising. We have people in David Drummond's area who continue to grow and continue to spend time with them. But it is going to take the collective efforts of many other people in industry working with us and working with the politicians and the governments to make this happen.
Last question from me, because we're out of time. We have Apple stores now. I am told have Microsoft stores coming. Are we going to have Google stores coming?
I don't know. I've learned in 5 years at Google never to rule anything out.
Okay. Thank you. We'll take that as a yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have one great applause to.
Oh, wait.
But Nikesh, wait.
Marcel's going to say something.
So actually, time is off. That was very interesting. Thank you again. And DLD is always, and you said you would like to proactively communicate. So please come to DLD to do that. What you did, what yesterday David did, and we consider ourselves being a platform here in Europe to discuss actually and to debate also. Quite happy about that. But Steffi, I think there's something about the DLD motto.
I asked you yesterday, what is the mantra of DLD? Who knows it?
Who knows it?
Esther, you forgot it.
Friendship.
Friendship is good.
And surprise.
Yes. And thank you for having us here, for coming. And
surprise.
Now it's a special surprise.
Okay,
Nikesh.
so I came here last night from San Francisco, and I found out that 200 people won a Nexus 1 phone in a raffle. Can people show me their hands who won a Nexus phone yesterday?
Stand up,
They already
please.
left. So there's like very few people here.
They're out using
How
them.
do the rest of you feel about that? Okay, so I've been able to figure out how we can let each of you have a Nexus phone before you leave this conference.
What about that?
And just one request. In the interest of making sure we respect the platform that Marcel and Steffi are providing, the booths will open after the last session, and you can go collect your Nexus one over there. And it's going to be for people who are here. Of course, if you leave before that, unfortunately, we cannot send it to you. So
We love
thank you
you.
very much once again.